Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's daily devotional. We're in the book of John. Today's devotion comes out of John chapter 13. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had to put all things under his power, and that he had to come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. I don't know if you guys are aware of what feet really meant to people back in those times. You know, feet were your way of traveling, the way to go somewhere far. People would walk for miles and miles and miles. And your feet would get just so disgusting. They would be filled with dirt, and sometimes if they were they'd get infections and would cause somebody to get sick. And sometimes feet just stunk, like really, really bad. When I was a kid, we went on a vacation with my family, and I was probably 10 years old, and my feet had gotten wet. And for whatever reason, I was like, okay, well, it's going to be whatever. Well, I get back to the hotel later, and something smelled really, really bad. And I honestly could not figure out what it was. So my family and I, we went looking around the hotel room trying to figure out what this smell was. And it turned out to be my shoes. I ended up sleeping the rest of the vacation with my shoes outside the hotel room, taking extra time in the mornings to go make sure that my feet were clean and that everything was good to go. But there are countless examples of how Christ humbly served humanity throughout the Gospels. My personal favorite, however, is the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. In the disciples' mind, this was just another Passover. There was nothing really special about it, but Jesus knew exactly what was coming. They didn't know, but John tells us that Jesus did. I can't fathom the amount of emotions and the range of emotions that Jesus must have been going through at that time. He was surrounded by the men he loved till the end. As they ate, they talked, and they walked through the Passover readings and responses. I wonder what was on his mind. What was he thinking? Was he thinking about the day he called each of them to follow him? The conversations that they had shared, the sacred moments, and maybe the fun moments as well. Perhaps he was mourning with them that he would never sit with them like this again on this side of heaven. He knew better than all of them the joy and the hope that awaited them on the other side of the cross. But he also knew for a time his sheep would be scattered and afraid. And John doesn't tell us exactly what Christ was thinking during the meal, but he does give us a powerful insight towards the end of the meal. In verse 3 it says, Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands, that he had come from God, and that he was going back to God. Christ, knowing the fullness of his power and glory, he felt compelled not to lord these things over the disciples or demand that they serve him, but to display his great love for them by washing their feet and by humbling himself. Even more so, humbling himself to dying on the cross. By stooping low to serve them, this verse spoke so clearly of Christ, his humility, which comes from a deep confidence in his true identity and sacred mission. And this is the same for us. In Colossians 3:12 through 13, Paul reveals our true identity in Christ, God's chosen ones, holy and dearly loved. And then says our response to this truth should be to put on compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. As Christians, we're called to live like Christ, to be humble and serve. We are expected to serve those around us, even those who betray us, not considering ourselves better than others. We're called to live our lives with Christ-like humility, a humility which says, I am a child of God, holy and dearly loved. Knowing who I am, I don't puff myself up with pride, but I humbly stoop low to display God's love through service, unity, and forgiveness. Thank you for joining us for this morning's devotional. I hope you have a good rest of the day. God bless.